I'm going to stand. I can't sit anymore.
That's all right.
Go for it, yeah. Get the mic
No,
set up.
I'll sit. Roger, sit down, please.
Gonna. I was just gonna like maybe.
Make room.
I was gonna do a kamikaze.
Are there any,
You didn't.
Are there any questions?
Ooh, look.
All right there. Go ahead, yes.
It's so beautiful that it seems not unscripted, like, and so I'm wondering how long did it take to make it, and was it really unscripted?
Well, I mean, Susan and I wrote a few scenes, and the material from Bob Carroll, Darryl Henriques, all of them. I knew the material. Basically, I was stealing from every thinker I could find in the Bay Area, and a lot of it was improvised. So with Whoopi, I asked her to just go somewhere. The directions were very wild. I mean, I actually thought I was making a movie about anarchy, and actually the making of the movie was anarchy, not the subject matter.
Hot mic for you.
So I didn't. It was just madness. I mean, there was no money. Everybody worked for free. I remember at one point, and we'd get together for periods of time because they were all volunteering. I don't know if you noticed at the beginning there were a large group of these young people. Near the end, they had pretty much given up on me, so I had to keep shooting tighter and tighter. But the one that I remember specifically was that I had to feed them something. So avocados were very cheap then, and they had a revolt against avocado sandwiches. They wouldn't eat any more avocado sandwiches that I made. That was the big protest. Susan, do you remember anything specifically?
Well, no, the process really was the fun part of that film.
Yeah.
And Farley happened to know a lot of very talented people in Berkeley at the time, which was lucky because, as you said, you just kind of brought your friends in and said, do what you do. And it's thinking it was 40 years ago, it's really remarkable how well it holds up. I mean, in terms of...
The content is scary.
Yeah, things haven't changed much.
Do you remember anything?
I'm super proud of it. I now know that the thing about the avocado sandwiches, then we forced you to get us bagels with cream cheese. So we need protein or we'll die. It was like every Sunday morning for a year. So, it really was a year. So we shot at least 52 times. And
I won't admit to that. I don't know, really. I can't remember. But I certainly feel like it stretched everybody's goodwill to the breaking point.
But you remember the audition process? That's what really gets to me, is that, someone asked about how much was improvised and how much was written. A ton of it was written, because we definitely had to memorize things. But people would show up in the scenes that weren't, our people who were so good, who would be reacting to things. And like that wonderful guy who starts singing the Irish ballad.
He was just in the crowd. Yeah. And at the end of the money box, he was just standing there, so I just let the camera kept running. But the whole thing was about letting the camera keep running. George were you teaching at the urban school then? Yeah. So he was doing outrageous things with students, high school students in the public. And he was the inspiration to do things that didn't make sense. You have any thoughts about that?
I thought everything made sense. And I hired that Irish guy to start singing at a certain point. So, I remember it now. It all comes back to me. I used to say, Bill, I don't know what I'm doing, but I think I do it pretty well. And we went to a number of locations that I had been taking my students around to. We called it Art in Public Places. It was a program the California Arts Council had a grant for murals for the muralists to do public places art. And I appealed to the Arts Council with the argument that performance artists were being penalized in the Art in Public Places program because we didn't paint on walls, but we performed interactively in public places. Peter Coyote, who was on the Arts Council at the time, said that was good enough for him. And he gave us a grant to go do that. So we would take students into public places, and then we would ask them to interact with the ambient reality, whether it was a waiting room or in front of that shop that had the buttons, and they all started applauding. You know, we would do things like that. And it was a 6-week class, and I would take them out 2 or 3 times a week. And sometimes Farley would come out to take a look at a location, and we would do an intervention like that. And Mal Sharp used to do these things also. You know, the man on the street had a long history of disturbing people who were just trying to get from one place to another and not have to actually be there in whatever that place was. So crosswalks, waiting rooms, places in between places was a lot of what we were thinking about. We would investigate. We would take them to City Hall, and they'd see that big staircase, the balustrade, you know, and then we would watch the way people were walking in and up and down the stairs, and we'd try to imitate it, so you wouldn't notice any difference. They would infiltrate the thing. And in a waiting room at the airport, we noticed some people were a little nervous, and they were shaking their legs, you know. So we would gradually begin to exaggerate the ambient behavior until everybody was shaking and everybody was, and then the regular people would sort of notice and pretend that they're not seeing it, and then we would all get up and leave, and that would be the event. I think Pauline Oliveras was also inspiration to that, because she used to do that on sidewalks with her classes. So she would change the speed at which people were walking on a sidewalk and slow the whole thing down without people understanding that they had been captured in that way. So that was great, Bill, that you were there to be able to capture this moment of craziness.
You know, it was a great privilege to steal a lot of George's good ideas and everybody else I knew. And I worked a lot with Mel Sharp, Man on the Street, and he donated the Take the Corpse on the Bus piece for me. And but it was that kind of generosity that that made it come together. No money. I mean, one of the things, the whole scene with Whoopi in the puddle, there was no lights. And when I saw it projected for the first time as a work print, I was shocked at the luminosity that came out of her. And it opened to the rock scene. She ran out and said, "Farley, I've been waiting my whole life to see myself on screen." Gave me a big hug. And before she got color purple, color purple. I think Spielberg saw her. I don't know how the hell he got clips out of this movie, but it was quite obvious that she was unique and gonna make it. There was no slowing her down.
But she made it all the way to the View.
Talk about you guys should talk about the Blake Street Hawkeyes a little bit, because when you talk about those exercises, that's
Oh, you mean like
Three Hawkeyes were in there.
yeah.
Whoopi, Bob, and Tom.
Yeah.
Bob Ernst, with the man who was doing the eulogy to the pyramid. He was a legendary character came out of the Iowa Center for New Performing, Iowa Writers Workshop. And then he got into the performance aspect of in Iowa, and he came out here when John O'Keefe was invited to do a show at the Magic Theater, in the old Magic Theater in Berkeley. And so then the Hawkeyes came and took the Magic Theater's rehearsal studio and made it the Blake Street Hawkeyes space for a number of years, where I would hear O'Keefe. We would go 3 nights a week. We would go in 7:30 to 7 to 10, and it was like a madhouse in there. We didn't, you know, the interactions with each other were, you know, sometimes quite frightening. I remember I got heart palpitations and had to go to Herrick Hospital.
I have a question. The car full of people with Michael Peppe, were you actually fearful of for your life?
Well,
Some of those. Very scary.
It was very exciting. It was thrilling. I was having a blast. I had to work hard to act like I was scared,
Oh,
actually.
Because they look.
He didn't know how to drive.
Well, that's what it kind of looked
He
like.
didn't know how to drive.
Well, he never had his hands on the wheel. I don't know. how
But,
to
so some of the terrifying looks were real fear, not acting. He did not know how to drive.
did want to get out.
Also, we had a like $3,000 camera taped to the hood, gaffing tape. Oh God, it was. I mean, Darryl Henriques threw us out of the cheese board. He threw us out. He got so angry, he forgot we were. I mean, he just forgot what we were doing. He threw us out. When we left, he would not let us back.
I know. I was afraid to go back there for kind of a while.
You know, the whole thing was nuts.
We
I mean,
were.
yeah,
He
but
was mad at us for like grabbing the cheese out of the vase and stuff.
He fixed you though,
And I
didn't
think
he?
that, yeah, I think that really was a.
The most
We
poisonous cheese.
really did leave a thumbprint on that block of Jack. Someone unwrapped it. It wasn't me.
Yes.
How did you choose the music? That was very interesting. That sort of live music.
So all my pals, Peter Gordon was a friend, and David Behrman, and so these are, and I also had been working at the Center for Contemporary Music, so everybody was just throwing in. It was crazy, and we just, everybody just contributed, and with no money passed hands. Though there is one story, a guy that I didn't know very well in San Francisco who had given money to another movie, but I didn't really know him. He showed up at my house when I was living in Oakland with a bag from Safeway filled with $20 bills, $2,000. Well, it's actually $20 short, but I didn't mention it to him, and he just donated it. And I don't know what his occupation was, but it certainly was not legal. But anyway, that helped a lot. But that's the kind of madness that was going on with the whole thing. Yeah.
So did you show people clips of the film and they composed to it, or?
No, those are cuts I knew about. I knew Peter Gordon very well, and so in the Love of Orchestra. You know, I chose the music, and everyone just gave it to me. Anything else? Yes.
I'd like to ask you.
So I'm fascinated by the auditions, and I love all the people in the auditions, and I have never understood how you picked who was going to be in it and who wasn't, because most of those people seem as interesting to watch as any of who you ended up with.
It's all.
And why didn't you put my audition? You said it would embarrass me. I don't think so.
It's all George Coach's fault.
Is that right?
He said to the people that the people who wanted to get in the movie, I just want you to. Oh, he may have allowed me to say it. I did say cut. I was there. But anyway, he said, I want you to contradict yourself as fast as you can. So the people who were doing the most contradictions of who they were or who they weren't, they got in. That's how it happened.
That's what it was. Okay. That's brilliant.
If you were to make a sequel today, what would it be like?
About 15 minutes long.
It would be fine.
Unfortunately, we could pull some of the content out of this thing and just, you know, there's a thing, You could, if I animated this, made everybody animated and cut it a lot shorter, we wouldn't have to throw any much more new political ideas in it. No, I mean, no, this happened to us. This happened to us. We claim we made it, but it's something that happened to us, like stepping in something.
Yeah. Yeah. The fall of Western culture.
Well,
I have a few more questions, but I want to make sure everybody, does anybody else have a question? Did you have a hand up right earlier?
I just was curious, what you said about energy, when you were making the film, when you were putting it together, it reminded me, the group of people reminded me of Slacker, you know?
yeah, I like Flackers.
So, like, you know,
I like Flackers a
moving
lot.
through an environment and commenting on it. But what were you thinking as you were putting together? What were you said energy was kind of the overarching. Were you thinking of overarching?
I mean, you could see some continuity from the car with bringing the dead man to the ballpark to the cemetery. I mean, there were kind of that we made these things after, but honestly, we really didn't know what it was doing, and we didn't know what people were going to do. I just recorded, a whole bunch of us recorded, and I tried to find environments that were going to frame the subtext. But so assembling it, it had an order appeared. But there's one other story. So oh my God, Naked Lunch. William Burroughs came out here, and he liked my films, and I wanted him to begin this movie, and but he wanted $5,000, and I didn't have $5, so it didn't happen. But I had a nice day with William Burroughs, and I should have started filming. Wasn't that quick or witted, but that was one of the things going on. I think the spirit of this kind of anarchy was in the air when we were making this film. It didn't surprise any of us. One other story. I was at the Deauville Film Festival in France. The director was in LA, and I wanted him to see it, and he said, well, instead of sending me the print, rent a screening room in Los Angeles, and I'll look at it for the Deauville Film Festival, Deauville Festival of American Films. I rented a screening room, and he didn't show up. About 2 days later, I get a call from the director of the Deauville Film Festival. He said, "You're in."
Oh.
This was like talking about fish out of water. I mean, it was, Robert Altman. I mean, every famous. I was in elevator with Gene Kelly. I mean, it was like, hi, Chuck Heston. Nice to meet you. Every A-list. I mean, maybe 3 people saw the movie, but it was in a movie theater at the Deauville Festival of American Films. So I had a lovely time for 10 days in France, just because the director had enough integrity to, out of shame, he invited the film. He never saw it.
Those were the days.
Can you speak more about your career as a filmmaker, as an artist? What has kept you going? If you want to mention any current projects, anything to share?
I noticed recently in a book that my mother kept when I was born, and the first sentence I found in her handwriting said, Billy, his first words, "I see." I've had a terribly persistent curiosity. I wrote recently that curiosity didn't kill the cat. It gave it 9 lives. So I ran into people I grew up with, and they said, Farley, you're always saying why? Why? You're really a pain in the ass. But I had this appetite for knowledge. And so all of my films are to explore what I don't understand. And I find that in the stories that land in my lap. I've just finished a story about World War II, trying to get try to get past the gatekeepers. But it's about 3 men who were in combat in World War II in Europe. And I actually have just discovered what the key is to get this out. I had 3 sneak previews and overwhelming positive response. And the previews weren't filled with relatives, they were strangers. And so I trusted their response to the film. But I think it's a confession. I've made some confession films. I have been mistaken for a priest several times in my life, a few times with the camera running. And these people tell their stories, and they're horrific. But what the real film is about is that anybody who is asked to kill doesn't fully recover. It doesn't matter the honor or the righteousness of the war. It's the act itself. Is the people who did this, my 3 men, 2 of them, all 3 never recovered, but 2 of them never could forgive themselves. And that's what my new film about is. It's called I Want to Be a Man with a Gun, 3 American soldiers in World War II. But it came out of my curiosity. And like all of these films, I put myself in these interviews. I interviewed these 3 men who I didn't know, but met. They filled in my lap, actually. The first one, I had a commission to make a film about an 83-year-old woman painter who did paintings of tragedies of tragedies of 20th and 21st century, and also did portraits. And during setups in her studio, her husband Carroll told me 3 of the most horrific stories about killing people that he killed, and I couldn't get the stories out of my mind. And a couple of years went back. I called Elaine, the subject of the documentary. I said, "Do you think Harold, your husband, would be willing to tell these stories on camera?" And she said, "He's been waiting his whole life to tell these stories on camera." So a lot of films fall in my lap, and I just go for it. So I don't know. I don't think I had a career. I've had a life with a camera running.
You once made a short documentary in India about a musician, a singer. Can you talk about that film? I really love that movie. And how that came about?
Jim Newman's a producer. Phil McKenna's here, and he produced one of Phil's films as well. Him and his wife Judy asked me to have lunch with them to brainstorm who they might consider to make a film about Pons Maar, an Indian singer, a raga singer. And I had lunch with them. I gave them some ideas. I got a call the next day. "Well, why don't you direct it?" So once again, it fell in my lap. And I did not know what to do. He was at one point in his career, he singing one raga on Indian radio. He made enough money to live for a year. So he was the premier vocalist of his particular style of Indian singing. Once again, I had ideas about following him around, but I have one story that sums it up. Every morning before the sun rose, we hired a jitney. The director, I, myself, Jim Newman, the producer, the cameraman and sound, we drove, and I would show us, okay, we're gonna go east. And then before the sun set, at the end of the day, I got another jitney and the 4 of us went out again, and I'd say we're gonna go west. And never knowing what the hell was gonna happen. Every single time that footage from those experiences that I did not know anything was gonna happen, got into the movie. So, I guess I have some form of trust, but it's not ego-based, maybe more mystical.
Somebody have their hand up? Any other questions? We got a little bit of time left. Does anybody?
We pretty much exhausted everybody.
Yeah, you had something else?
Well, yeah, I wanted to I wanted to also ask about that footage, about like what to do when a bomb went off and stuff. Was that real or filmed? It seems so extraordinary.
It was called Duck and Cover, and when I taught at the Center for Contemporary Music at Mills, at times we'd go to Sacramento to the recycle of government property, and they would have flat wooden flats full of films. You could buy them by the pound, and I found it in a flat of 100 pounds of 16mm film. And same with I found a lot of found footage that way.
And so at some point it had been actually...
It was used in schools. That was from the school systems at the...
So bizarre.
Yeah. So that was what I grew up with.
Oh.
Well, I want to thank you for your patience and.
You had something?
You're probably getting to it, but don't let people forget that there's a piano full of signed posters over there.
$20 if you want to buy a citizen poster.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
We did that. No, you have to have the last word.
Yeah.
You have to have the last word, I think. You have to say good night. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, my dear collaborators. That's my last word. And thank you, Jeff.
I want to thank Mercer behind the scenes with the AV tonight, and Clara, Sue, and you all for coming out. Feel free to talk to William or any of us. We'll be around. Thank you again.